main conversation in pre-production. What is Afropop?
Do you want to school us on what Afropop is? Or are you asking me what is Afropop?
If I make a statement now, she'll say I'm assuming for her. So I'm opening the
floor.
I'm opening. I asked the question. I asked the question, so the one woman on the show can answer.
How do you know there are not 2 women in me? Or like, anyhow. So I think what we know the most, as the catch-all term, where Nigerian pop music is concerned, is Afrobeat. Afrobeat being the offshoot of Fela's Afrobeat, the modernized offshoot. But I think in more recent times, I for one think Afropop is a thing, because you can hear how we're taking our Nigerian sound and blending it with Western pop elements, in sense of the mixing, the production, the sonics. And I think that's what makes Afropop.
The mixing, the production, the sonics. Elaborate, please.
Say, let's use Omalay's, the sonics on Omalay's Boy Alone as an example. Mm-hmm. So, say for instance, Attention even sounds, before the album was a thing, Attention sounded more like a Justin Bieber song. But then you have Omalay, and that's the thing about how what makes an artist who they are is their essence. So if you take Omalay and you put him on a J Balvin song, Omalay will probably still speak pidgin, and Omalay will probably still, yarn about Trans Amadi and his Port Harcourt roots and things like that. And it is, the cadence at which he approaches, or the cadence with which he flows on whatever beats that still brings the Afropop element.
So Afropop has less to do with its production now?
Not necessarily, not all the time, because we also have our own pop music. So maybe there is the Afropop that sounds more Western hinged, and there's also still the Afropop that sounds very Ibile, very Nigerian. From the language to the sonics, everything still feels very much ours.
Last episode, we didn't talk about the Grammy Afropop Afrobeats article. Bamyy is eating on the show. We didn't talk about that. Now, the problem we found ourselves in is that we've not defined these terms. And with music, a lot of times it's hard to define or not define. Things happen and then we let it go. That was why a lot of people felt like we shouldn't call it Afrobeats, because Afrobeats was actually a term that was heavily used in the UK. I know a lot of Nigerian journalists, a lot of Nigerian publications. For example, The Native kind of made it a thing to term it Afropop as a catch-all for Nigerian pop music, and not really defining what that pop music is supposed to sound like, just where it comes from. And because of that, now we have a lot of sounds and a spectrum that exists that we now don't know what even is Afropop. I think for me, Afropop, a lot of it is in the percussion. I know you always talk about the tempo of Nigerian music. I think there's a percussive element of Afropop that is really unique and distinct.
I agree.
And then, like you said, the inflections, the lingo, and the approach to how these songs are recorded. In terms of the actual sonics, even though we might know what these things are, I think it would be better if we had an actual producer come and tell us these are the type of the tempo and all of that. But I think for the most part, Afropop today is Nigerian popular music.
Yeah, and modern Nigerian pop music.
Exactly, and it's a combination of Highlife, R&B, hip hop. What else? There's not a lot of rock. There's not a lot of rock in it, but yes, Afrobeat, Highlife,
Neo Fuji,
and yes, all of that into what Afropop is. Now, do we agree with the Grammys that Afrobeats stroke Afropop was built off of America?
Blend of, how do you even say it?
A blend of inspired by American culture, American black culture.
I do not agree. And
a lot of people don't agree. I know I saw a sample, I think it's Sample Chief on Twitter.
Yeah.
That posted an old video, showing how a lot of songs, a lot of
the hip hop greats of the early 2000s, the Remedies and Plantation Boys, Like when we're sitting diggity
the very foundations of Afropop are built on hip hop because a lot of the guys that were popping in the early 2000s were hip hop artists.
Yeah.
The first set of people to get endorsements were hip hop artists.
And as like the sample chip video shows, they a bunch of them were also like samples or like they were interpolations of like popular hip hop songs from America and all of that. But I think that was a very, very what's the word? It was still a reach because
how is it a reach if you can clearly
we've
see
evolved so much past that.
But they were talking about its origins. They weren't talking about what it is.
What it is right now, and even like its
Do you think they put
not
too much emphasis
yes,
on the...
that's why I said it's a reach. Was it Afrobeat or Afropop?
Afrobeat is Afropop.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Afrobeat is Afropop. Afropop is just the term that some of us have decided to
that
call
like
it.
when you hear, say for instance now, what Brimo does on some songs and you hear the percussion.
That's more Highlife though.
No.
Brimo leans a lot more into
There's
Highlife.
a way the like Afrobeat. Say for instance, Burna Boy's Burna Boy's Soke. Burna Boy's
Soke is Afrobeat, not Afrobeat. Afrobeat is the catch-all term now that they were saying in the UK. It's a catch-all term just like Afropop.
So what's Afrobeat?
Beats or
where's
beat.
Afrobeat?
Beats.
Yes.
It's Afropop now. Popular African music. Popular African Nigerian music. Like we said, a blend of Highlife, Fuji, all of that.
Beats and pop no be the same thing now.
They're both catch-all terms now.
Because they are catch-all terms doesn't mean that they entirely capture the same sound and the same culture.
But when people talk about Afrobeats, they are talking about all the Omalays, the Wizkids.
That's the thing that like we need to delineate as the people. We don't do that, which is why.
That's why I said, how would you write it as a platform when you are dodging it?
Because why are you taking me to
this is part of the problem. Nigerian journalists too don't want to take the onus to define certain things.
And the person didn't do their research because they also lumped Amapiano, they lumped Sukus and Alte as subgenres of Afrobeat.
That's what I'm saying now. They're definitely not. I don't know who told them Amapiano is a subgenre. So my final takes on this Omale thing. The album is a lot better than I thought, that I give it credit for. I still feel like it leans a lot more into R&B than it does traditional Afropop, and that's fine. Like that's even what we should kind of expect.
Traditional Afropop, and when was Afropop ever a traditional thing?
Bamyy wants to drag me into an argument she knows that will last for 2 hours.
Said Afrobeat
you
and
know
Afropop
very well what I
thing,
mean.
Man.
Eh?
Because you said Afrobeat and Afropop
they are.
the same thing.
Because Afrobeats was a catch-all term that UK DJs were pushing to talk about Nigerian
You know what?
music.
Let me just say
different writers now said, "Oh, let's not call it Afrobeats."
Let me say this
because of the similarity to Afrobeat and the confusion therein. Let's call it Afropop. That's it.
Okay, you know what? Since there's clearly no unity on even what like Nigerians call their genre in total, or like what some people call the type of music that they make, I think it's fine and well that I come and say this is what I think this is my opinion, right? So I think because if you look at Nigerian music has had different golden eras. Fela Lijadu sisters, when we're doing like amazing funk music, that was a golden era. We were getting press even then.
Amazing what?
We were making amazing music then, and it was a golden era.
What was it? What was it? What's the genre?
I'm not talking about genres. I'm talking about golden. I'm talking about golden eras. You get so like moments of boom, like in the Nigerian music scene. Now, away from that, Two-Face, D'banj, P-Square, that was another golden era. And then was what we knew then was Afrobeat. It was that time. It was what we knew then was even like.
I don't think we even had the term then. We were just calling it Nigerian.
But that is when you now think of Afrobeats. That is like where it started from. But now I'm now saying for where we are now, which is an entirely different golden era, where it is now even like a more global phenomenon, a more global movement. I think where we are now, the way things keep moving, because sounds change, the mixing, the mastering is different, the feel of the music is different. I would actually think what we are making now is more aligned to Afropop than Afrobeat?
Okay, so Bamyy, do you remember when they started calling Nigerian music Afro? That was like a few years ago, like before the pandemic. I think
18,
20
17, 18.
like 17, yeah. Around the time when did Wizkid pop, like outside Niger?
Uh, 16,
Around
17.
that time, do you remember when they started calling African music Afrobeats? And they basically just added the S in front of Afrobeats, which was like a big problem for everyone, right? And automatically, what I thought at the time, I kind of felt they were going to put everything under Africa in that bracket at the end of the day, because it was a very, very lazy attempt at naming a genre that we should have named by ourselves, even at the end of the day, and put out there,
I
and
don't
people
think
from
we
outside the
expected
country.
it to grow so globally so quick.
I mean, like, we just let it happen now, right? We didn't fight back at it like as much as we should have. Yeah, and I know for the longest time at Native, we always called it Afropop, even though people were calling it Afrobeats, like in a bit to fight the system or whatever, or
This is
fight
true.
the narrative.
Mhm.
But that didn't fly. Everybody was still calling it Afrobeats because it was
Popular, it had
convenient.
already,
Yeah, it already like worked. We saw why people calling it Afrobeats, and seeing that was it Grammy article some weeks ago was like I knew this was going to happen moment for me, because I knew they were going to put everything in that box that the box all African music was going to be under Afrobeat, right? I knew that was going to happen, but I would say Afropop is kind of like similar to Afro, because what is Afrobeats really? If you want to describe an Afrobeats, right? Is at the end of the day, it's popular African music. Last. I say popular African music, sorry, popular Nigerian music, because they don't really call like music from, let's say, Ghana Afrobeats, for example. You wouldn't. Some of them are similar to like the kind of music we make here, because we've also borrowed like pieces from their own music.
From Highlife.
Yeah, Highlife. Even their popular music itself, like the pom thing,
music.
Banku music, Mr. Easy, that shit. Even like the pom sound, it was the Ghanaian thing at first, so that kind of thing was
Shout
borrowed.
out to Ghanaians.
Yeah, borrowed cultures and whatnot, but it was better if it was called Afropop, because at the end of the day, it's basically popular African. I won't say African music, because I guess it might have been misconception right there, but it was popular. I would just say popular West African music, right? But right now, it's pretty much the same thing at the end of the day. I get what Djaji is saying with like him saying Afrobeats and Afropop are the same thing. But I think I listen to me.
They're both catch-all terms.
Yeah, I think they're actually the same thing.
They're both catch-all terms. One is more correct. One is corrective. And even with genres like grime artists didn't like the fact that grime was called grime. But over time, they just let it, like, what can we do now? At least people are talking about a genre. In the same way, like, this argument is not necessarily deep, but it does cause confusion when you term something Afrobeats and someone thinks like, oh, Afrobeats, is it the same thing? Like, people call it. So that's why even, like you said, platforms wanted to say Afropop.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, for example, now I will ask you a question, right? Which is kind of interesting. Would you say Victoni makes Afrobeat music? Yeah, but it's Afropop at the end of the day. Like, that's why Afropop works better or works best.
Which is why I said I'm speaking for myself and from my own understanding that Afrobeat beats with an S and Afropop signal like a turn and signal like a progression in like sound and also even in visibility of the culture and the movement.
But progression of a genre does not necessarily mean you need to change the title. It's just national.
But this progression
evolution.
also sees us, being more global sounding.
That is why I don't understand why people are so apprehensive about people saying its origins are Black America. Afropop has always been globally tinged. We've always had artists that lived abroad, for example, and came back to Nigeria to push his sound. We've always had artists at home that were influenced by foreign sounds and decided to replicate. I mean, one of the major gripes people have about P-Square is that they feel like P-Square is very unoriginal. They were just copying R&B and pop songs that blew in America.
The problem with that the narrative that the Grammy article was trying to push, saying that like it's a Black American. I mean, yeah, like the foundation of what we have now, what we call Afropop or Afrobeats now, right, is like Black American culture to an extent, right? Because a lot of these guys came all the way back from there,
Yeah.
to make music around here. But still, like the sound is nothing close to like what they are doing out there, bro. Like it's not. It's far from it even, right? Because and I can
In aspects, yeah. In certain
in
genres.
so many ways, like in so many ways, bro.
Nigerian hip hop is still very. Obale's album, there are a few tracks there.
No,
A lot
but
of
like
tracks
we
there.
won't call a hip hop song Afrobeats now, would we?
Yeah, we wouldn't.
Yeah.
But we, in the same way that I don't want people. See, what I feel like, right, is that we should even break this whole, like, just because you are from Africa, we have to put the Afro before something because you're African.
Oh yeah.
Omale makes an R&B album. It is an R&B album.
I don't know. I'll call it an R&B album.
No. I'm just saying, if to you, it's an R&B. It's an
yeah.
R&B album. I'm not going to call it Afro R&B. It's R&B. If Fireboy makes a dancehall album, it's dancehall. Like I don't have to call it Afropop or whatever. Like I feel like we should just call genres what they are.
I thought the same thing when I listened to Fireboy's, Afro Highlife. It reminded me of this conversation that talks about how we as humans living in internet age, we have this need to contentify our lives. And it just sounds like when you see Afro in front of everything, it feels like we have this need to commercialize our sound and just like, push it to the Western gaze. But at the same time, when you take dancehall and you make dancehall as a patois ranking or as a young L, the patois you are speaking is not necessarily the one that you're speaking in Kingston, Jamaica. You're speaking pidgin inside of it, right? The percussion is probably also different. So these are the elements as well that, bring that Afro inside it. And at times it can be cringe and must sweep to like Afro salad. Why is Afro in everything? Okay. But like it is relevant.
A dancehall song from Barbados and a dancehall song from Jamaica are both dancehall, right?
Right.
But Jamaican patois and Barbadian patois are different.
Man, no be patois experts, but I guess. But you do know that like it will only be like dialectal differences. It's not going to be like major differences. That is something that you might want to take into like cognizance.